Having trouble. No, there we go. We're live. Okay, everybody, we're having had a little delay there, but we're live. We're so excited to be back live on Purpose Live. We're talking about a tough story today, but a great, great ending. I think people get in trouble, their marriages are falling apart, and we wonder where is God in the middle of all this. And we're going to talk about Neil Getzlow's story. He's got an incredible story. He's got a book that just came out called Unmasked, and it's conquering sexual sin. He's got a heck of a story. He and his wife Amy have 5 boys coming to us from Kansas City. Is that right? Kansas City?
Yes, that's right. Thank you for having me. Appreciate it.
And we're going to talk about, I love a great testimony because it's really hard when you've got a difficult journey to come out and just share the real truth about what you've done and what you found at the end of that. And Neil's got a great story. It's tough to hear, but it's important because we're all wearing masks. And he says, and I think it's brilliant, that as the world was putting masks on, he was unmasking. And you were pretty much forced to unmask. So let's just jump right to the point. You had been struggling with pornography and sexual sin since 9, and then 2020 was a turning point for you. Tell us what happened.
Yeah, so like you said, I had a lifelong addiction to pornography, started at the age of 9. As I became an adult, soon that it just wasn't enough. I had this hole in my heart that I tried to fill up with pornography, drugs, alcohol, whatever, you name it. Could never fill it up. Became an adult and had the means to, that sort of morphed into an addiction to sex, and specifically paying prostitutes for sex. And so that led me to a hotel room in Chicago in February of 2020 on a business trip. And I set up an arrangement to go meet a prostitute in her hotel room in downtown Chicago. Went to the appointment. As I was getting ready to leave, her partner came out of the other bedroom. He was about 6'5", 300 pounds, looked like a Chicago Bears offensive lineman, dressed in drag, of course, of all things. But he's got his.
And you didn't know he was in there. You had no idea he was in the other room.
Nope, no idea.
Wow.
And then he came out though, and holding his cell phone in his hand, and I noticed that it had my wife Amy. It had her social media account and her contact information on the phone. And he's like, "You're gonna have to pay us more money, or we're gonna call your wife." And of course, this was not the first time I had done anything like this, of course, but certainly the first time in my life where I thought, okay, this is a do or die moment. What am I going to do to get out of this? And of course, I wanted to do anything to get out of that room and get away from the situation. So about $900 later, I did manage to get myself out of that room unharmed, at least unharmed physically anyways.
Oh, but you were in a panic.
Yeah, I mean, the adrenaline's rushing.
Yeah.
And but as I'm running to the elevator, I can hear the door open up back behind me, and they yell out, "Hey, you're going to need to pay us more money, or we're going to call your wife." And at that point, elevator doors opened. I got out of the hotel. But here's the thing: this is a secret life I've been leading. Yeah. So I went about my day, put my mask on, hid what just happened to me, and went on with my meetings, and nobody knew. Nobody knew I had this. Just been, had this encounter with a prostitute and was being blackmailed. You couldn't even tell. If you saw me, I was, normal.
I mean, you had become so accustomed to lying and covering your tracks that this was, I mean, you knew you were going to have to deal with it, but this was no new thing. I mean, you were so skilled at covering your tracks, living under a mask, that, I mean, this just was the next mask.
It was, and at least I thought I was skilled, and I thought I would never get caught. But of course, I'd never had anyone try to blackmail me before, so this was a first. And I made it home from the business trip. They hadn't called Amy yet, and so I'm thinking, okay, this is great. I'm going to be able to keep this secret life. I'm only out a few $100s. Amy doesn't know. Wonderful. We'll move on. But then 3 days later, this is March 1st, 2020, Sunday night. About 9:30 p.m. I'm working in my office, and my cell phone starts blowing up, and it's this couple again, and they're texting me, Amy's picture and contact information saying, hey, you're going to have to pay us more money or we're going to call Amy. And I think that I was pretty naive thinking, well, you know what, I'm just going to string them along and ignore him. Eventually they'll get bored and move on. But really once they had no use for me, you know, they decided to blow me up. And exactly 15 minutes later, I hear the phone ringing upstairs in our bedroom. I hear Amy's phone ringing, and I hear this muffled conversation going on. And then I can hear that. I just remember that I could hear these footsteps going down the stairs and walking toward my office, getting louder and louder. And of course, you know, she burst in to my office and she's like, "Are you cheating on me?" And I like to say that's the first time that I encountered God. He had to hit me in the head 3 times before I finally got the message that, hey, I might need to do something about these sexual sins that I have going on. And
and she had suspected that you had infidelity issues before. That's correct, right? And I read where she was relieved to know what she was really dealing with. As bad as it was, she had to know, you know, living in a world of suspicion is a tough thing to do.
yeah, I think as she reflects on, you know, our marriage, the last 6 years of our marriage, she could probably point back to signs of things that were going on or things that seemed strange, but she could never quite put her finger on it. She never had proof. She didn't have any, you know, she didn't have access to my phone or any of my accounts, so she couldn't see anything that was going on. And so, yeah, I think she was relieved that, okay, I'm not crazy, something's going on, but it still didn't add up in her head. I told her, because what I told her in that room, I lied to her still. I told her this is the first time I've ever done anything like this. You know, I'm never going to do it again. I was more sorry that I was actually caught in this situation than I was sorry for bringing this evil into our house.
Yeah. And I'm glad you call it that, because it is evil. So you know, you basically had a demon sitting on your shoulder the whole time you're married, and you know he's trying to convince you this is okay, it's not a big deal, you know, it's just a little addiction. And in the meantime, you know, you know, God is going to deal with you at some point, and this point had just set itself up, and you know he wanted more for you than that kind of life. So
yeah,
and I think what Amy did next, and I know it wasn't right then, but
yeah,
she handled this with such grace because she had been forgiven. How did her forgiveness extended to you?
yeah.
I mean, that had to have been a moment of like, oh my gosh, I can't believe this.
It was the life-changing moment. She gave me the greatest gift I've ever gotten. Let me get to the backstory real quick on how religion got into this conversation. But you know, when we met, neither of us were believers. Amy grew up Catholic, so she had some background, but you know, didn't really have any relationship to God. I grew up Jewish and really considered myself an atheist. So I have zero connection to God, didn't even think there was a God. I thought we were here, we die, and we're done. And but 3 months after we got married, Amy became born again Christian, and and she told me, she's like, I'm a follower of Jesus, which completely just it rocked my world. In fact, I would say that moment kind of triggered my anxiety and my depression, which was ultimately how I medicated myself, was with pornography and prostitution. It was almost a trigger, kind of a relapse of those addictions that just kicked in big time. And so Amy prayed for my soul for 8 years. 8 years she prayed for me to get saved. And finally, after this encounter in Chicago, about 6 weeks later is when there were a couple of other events, two additional hits in the head from God. One was when I attempted to set up an appointment in Kansas City to meet someone I had an arrangement with, a prostitute. And Amy discovered those messages on my laptop that's usually locked. I leave the house, I lock it down for whatever reason this time. It wasn't locked. And Amy texted me those screenshots of my interaction. Ultimately, when I came home from that, trying to go to that appointment, turned around, came home, Amy told me, she's like, look, if there's any chance of saving this marriage, you have to ask God for help.
Yeah.
And so we went to bed that night, woke up the next morning. Amy was already gone. She had left the house. I don't know where she went. So I was like, well, this is a good enough time as any to pray. And that's what I did. I said, God, I don't know what I'm doing. I'm at the bottom of this pit. Like everything is unraveling. Help me. I don't know what else to do. Give me a sign. And as soon as I finished that prayer, the garage door pops up and it's Amy. And, I didn't realize it at the time, but she is the key to this whole story.
Yeah.
And I told her that I prayed and I want to work on things. And, she reluctantly agreed. But then a couple hours later, as I'm sitting down on the couch with her, it's her turn to get a text message. This is the final time God decides to say, okay, here we go. So she gets a text message on Facebook from some random guy that we don't know that basically says, do you know a Neil Getzlow? Well, I find out later that was someone's ex-boyfriend of someone else who I had an encounter with. Anyways, when that message came, I didn't wait. I felt overwhelmingly compelled to share everything with Amy. And I describe it in the book like I just threw up all over the floor of our marriage. And because you can feel it gurgling, in your stomach and it just works its way up and out. But the amazing thing is, after you're sick, like you feel better. And I did. I just told her everything that I was hiding for our entire marriage, and I felt relieved and I felt a lot better. But then I'm waiting for the other shoe to drop. Like, what is Amy going to say? And again, what she said to me changed my life. She looked up at me and she's like, Neil, Jesus forgave me for my sins. How can I not forgive you for yours? I forgive you.
Oh, that had to be an incredible moment because she could have been angry. She could have been, get out. She could have given you the keys and said, don't ever come back. Many, and she would have rightly before God been okay to do that. But
Absolutely.
Somehow God moved in her at the same time as he moved in you and softened her heart. And that was her response and your response coming together at that moment. Really is, it's like you said, God suddenly got in the middle of y'all. And that is incredible. That's just incredible. It's not many women can do that.
No, I don't know how else to describe it but a miracle. And I'll also say, like, and again, this is coming from someone who's Jewish and atheist, the most cynical person in the world, to say that not only was Amy forgiving me, that was Jesus working his will through Amy to forgive me. Because instantly, ever since she said, I forgive you, I have not looked at porn since. I have not been tempted to look at porn since that day, and that's been 18 months. I've not been tempted to stray outside of my marriage or meet prostitutes or any of that stuff. My life is a complete 180-degree turn from where it was from that point of redemption. And that is because of God. You cannot convince me otherwise.
Let's talk about that coming clean part that you did, because you told her everything in that moment, and everybody has secrets, so to speak, and that's Satan's playground. Shame, when you have so much shame and you're spending your whole life trying to hide behind that shame, cover it up so nobody knows anything that you're doing, and all of a sudden everything is exposed. So you can look at it from, God loved you enough, loved her enough to allow this opportunity for you to be able to begin to rebuild and reclaim your marriage. And, I think that's an important point, but how important was it for your freedom? Because some people would say, I don't believe him. I don't know if he's really telling the truth.
Sure.
Is he really not, is he really not looking at all this stuff again? But what do you say to someone about the power of coming clean and not having secrets anymore? How important was that part of your story?
Well, it was huge. And, I will say, like, Amy's forgiveness was more for her than it was for me, because by her forgiving me, that just tore away any bitterness that she would harbor. Like, it made it easy. It made it easier for us to start to rebuild our relationship and our marriage. But one of the most important things too is, like, it did not absolve me from any accountability or responsibility for my actions. I absolutely had to take accountability for my actions.
Yeah.
And it was freeing because, one of the things that I also did, again, all glory to God, because he kickstarted this, but I had to walk through the door. But another part of that was also talking to a counselor for my mental health.
Mm-hmm.
And my counselor helped me unlock a couple of things. One of the big things he helped me unlock was he told me, he's like, I've been living with telling all these lies. Like, it was impacting how I communicated with Amy, because all I could think about was how is what I'm telling Amy matching up to 6 years of lies, all these stories? Is it flowing together? Like, it took all of my energy to just keep that straight. So
Yeah.
I could not have a real conversation with anybody, because in the back of my mind, I'm thinking, am I going to blow my cover? Am I going to expose myself to the lies that I've been sharing?
Yeah.
I'm
guessing that you avoided people, like depth of conversation, intimacy conversation, because you had to keep everything so surface so that you didn't get caught in your own web of lies, that you just probably had everybody at arm's length for years.
Yeah, absolutely. That's exactly what happened. And, when I finally got rid of, exposed all the things I was hiding behind my mask, like, it freed up so much more brain power that I could actually have those in-depth conversations with Amy and have those intimate moments. And it just changed the dynamics of our relationship. The other thing too, which is important, was, once this happened, I gave Amy access to everything. She had the passwords to my phone. She could get on any app. She could see what I'm doing. She can get on my laptop and look at anything. And believe me, she did. She turned into a forensic detective.
I don't blame her. I would have too.
She could do everything. But I'll say, it's funny though. She doesn't look at my phone maybe once every couple months now. But every time she grabs for it, I still have this old reflex of like, oh my gosh, what is she going to find? And then I realize she's not going to find anything, which is again, that to me, that's also a very freeing part. I don't have to worry about, I'm just not hiding anything anymore.
Well, and what do you say to people? We know pornography is just, it is plaguing our society in so many ways. It's in the middle of many marriages. I mean, we hear about pastors, it being a problem with things like that. I mean, we read statistics, and you have 5 sons between y'all. I mean, what are we going to do as Christians to begin to turn the wave of this? I mean, this is gripping our nation, our world. It's in our homes. So what can we do to begin to stand up to this? Because, people feel like we've lost this battle, and we can't feel that way. I mean, we see God in the middle of yours. How do we invite him in the middle of this, so we as Christians can begin to also unmask? I mean, it's a big deal.
It is. And, we've got to take the culture back. Yeah. I think our culture, the culture of this world, has been stolen by evil and the enemy. Yeah. And they're doing everything they can to bring people into this evil. And, there was just an article a few weeks ago in Time Magazine that basically glorified, there's a website out there where any average everyday American can post pictures of themselves in compromising positions and get paid for it. Mm-hmm. They wrote this entire article legitimizing that industry. And it just floors me that's I can't judge someone who is, on the other side of the camera, who's producing this material. I don't know what they're going through. I don't know the struggles they have. But you know what? What we can control? We can control ourselves and our thoughts. And what Jesus said, right? Like, if you look at a woman with lust, you're already committing adultery.
Right.
For men, we've got to take our culture back. And it starts in our own backyard. It starts in our house. And the shows that we're watching, the things that we're putting into our heads every single day. In our household, we canceled cable TV. We canceled Netflix. We canceled all of our sports subscriptions. We got rid of not all. We got rid of quite a few distractions from the world, of all things that were bringing this these lustful desires into our house.
Yeah.
And then, then you got to challenge the men at church and make sure they understand the dangers of it.
Yeah.
And we can't be silent on it anymore. And that's why I felt so compelled to tell my story, because I know people struggle with it. They don't think it's a bad thing. They don't think porn is bad. But what I've learned since my redemption is that porn and prostitution, it leads to sex trafficking, without question.
Yeah, it does.
And there are people that are
into it for sure.
Yeah, without a doubt, people that are doing this against their will. Maybe people aren't. Some people aren't, but more people than you might imagine are. And that's probably one of the things that bothers me the most as I think back to my actions, which is, how do I know the people that I came across, whether in real life or whether on the web? How do I know they weren't forced into it?
Well, that's a great point. And I believe too, you see the statistics of, loneliness is at an all-time high, depression is at an all-time high. And you have these young people and even people that are been married for a long time. They think they're going to find some level of intimacy in this relationship. But what you find is the opposite of intimacy.
That's right.
And that hole that was in your heart just got bigger the more you tried to fill it with the wrong thing, right? So
yeah,
how do you begin to shift your you've gone the God direction. So how do you tell someone else, we can do this? Turn to God. How you did that? How can someone else do that?
Yeah. So, and you mentioned it, how do people trust me when I tell them that I haven't looked at this? And, and even Amy asked me, are you tempted or anything like that? Yeah. And I tell them, I'm not, but I said, if you want proof, look at the fruits that God is producing in our lives, and look at the fruits that God is producing in my life. And here's how I did it. I replaced all of the negative stuff, the junk food of your mind. I threw it all out. Again, changed my viewing habits. I stopped drinking, stopped going out to the bars, hanging out with my friends, stopped doing drugs, all of it, threw it away. And in its place, I filled up with God. I read the Bible. I listen to sermons online. I listen to sermons as I run. I read the Bible last year from cover to cover, simply on my morning runs every day. It's just, I don't have time for anything else, because I'm filling up my heart now with the good stuff. My heart is full, filled with God and the Word of God, and wanting to be, not only, wanting to worship God and bring glory to God, but then it makes me want to be a better man. It makes me want to be a better husband, a better father, a better member of the community. Like I represent Jesus. That's my change.
And you're a new man now. So, you see in the Bible where old things are gone, new has come, but you continue to have to make the choices things. And that's one of the points that I want to make with you is this isn't over for you. This isn't over for Amy. This is a long journey for y'all to rebuild and reclaim your marriage, which y'all are doing. So this is not just like, okay, good, we're done with that. Glad that's over. This is part of your story, yes, but it's also part of how you have to choose better in your life to keep you from ever creating, that distrust with her, or God forbid ever going back, which, once God's done his stuff, I don't see that ever happening. But this, to someone who may be struggling with something, you never just don't, you may get past it because your faith is stronger, but it is a process, and you continue to have to make choices that align with what God is doing, right?
Yeah, absolutely, because there is temptation everywhere you turn. There's temptation on what you're listening to in the car on the way to work. There's temptation when you turn on the TV, when you get home from work. There is temptation everywhere. And like I said earlier, like the culture is trying to seduce you away from God and into this culture of the world where you just love everything. And like, that's why for me, even, I was getting seduced by sports. like, because I would watch so much sports and I would worship those players that like they were gods versus worshiping the real God. And so you've got to eliminate those distractions. You've got to eliminate the best you can those temptations. But I will also say you can't eliminate everything. There's just too much. But the power that you have is in your Bible and the Word of God, and filling up on that and getting the energy and encouragement from reading Scripture. That's how you're able to battle. You put on the armor of God, right? That's how you're able to withstand those temptations.
But your battle your recovery started the moment you cried out to God for help. And he helped you.
Yeah.
He came in and he helped you. And that was a big turning point for you. It starts there, and then you add the word and you add all that. And then I want to talk about communication in marriage. Marriages are under attack. That's another thing that's just, and then we gotta wrap it up. But
yeah,
for marriage in general, what do you say? Maybe it's a workaholic, maybe it's an alcoholic, different level of other distraction from the marriage that is causing strain. Y'all have learned to now communicate effectively, whether honestly. So what do you say to a couple or a family that needs to come together and rebuild what it is they have, and how to communicate that with one another, so that you don't end up in a war, but you end up working through things and coming back together?
Yeah. So again, I'll go back to, you've got to, this is what Amy and I did for us. We put God at the center of our relationship. That's where we started. We prayed together. We prayed for help. We prayed for redemption in our marriage. That's where it started. And again, God opens the doors. He gives us the path to choose. But we've got free will, right? We got to make that choice, that conscious choice to take those steps in faith. And that's what we did. So we learned how to communicate to each other again. We spent so many nights on our back deck last year just talking, and we bought these boxes of communication cards like that ask you these really bizarre questions like, what's your ideal date, or weird things to learn about another person. But we just went through 5 boxes of those, just having a conversation, listening to each other, and then trying to build that trust again and build that intimacy. And that's the key for me. You've got to talk through it. And also I would challenge folks too, whether you go see a professional counselor or whether you're talking to your pastor or someone in church that you trust, it's okay to bring someone in to help you figure out how to do that, because that's what we did. And we got tips on what to do. And I mean, it was as simple as, making sure that we have a date night once a week, where it's just going out and just having a good time and being around each other. So, and that's the amazing, that's the most amazing thing that I love talking about, is the fact that my marriage is the marriage that I've always wanted today. Where we've been and now where we are today. Like this would be crazy for me to say just 2 years ago, but today it's like, I want to spend every moment I can with my wife and be with her as much as I can, because it's just amazing.
You've become one, and and you had to take what was broken and fix it. But God, in the midst of that, now you've got what you've always dreamed of, and I think that's just incredible. Well, we're going to have to kind of wrap it up here, because we could talk all day about this. But so people can get your book at your website, neilgetzlow.com. And what can they expect in it? What are the golden nuggets that they'll find when they read your book?
Sure. So I go through in a little bit more detail just my journey from how I first discovered porn to that hotel room in Chicago, and then also go through and talk about what are the things that happened in my childhood that led me to using pornography and later sex as a sort of a drug to medicate myself. That's where my therapist really helped me understand. So I unpack a lot of those family issues in there. But then, the bulk of the book is talking about just what I've done to build my relationship with God, to rebuild my marriage, and just talking about how I transformed myself. And it's, I'll also say too, if you buy the book from my website, we're donating $5 from every book sold on my website to Run to Stop It, which is an organization that's fighting against sex trafficking in the United States. It's an important organization and one that we're very passionate about. So I appreciate you letting me share my testimony and my story with your audience here tonight.
Well, I thank you for doing it, and you do it very well with openness, but the testimony part of it is equally as powerful, because God is in the midst of it, and this is I like to say, we change the world one story at a time, and you've got a whole sexual perversity in our world, and so people can see they can be free of that. So thank you for sharing that up, and we'll come back and do this again. We'll talk about this more later as you had a chance. But thank you, Neil, thank you for sharing your story. Thank you for writing your book, and thank you for encouraging people to come clean and become free as God intended for us, because that is what we are free indeed. So thank you for being an illustration of that.
Yeah, thank you. I so appreciate the time.
Yeah. Tell Amy hello, and next time we'll get you both on and talk together, because I think that'd be a great addition to what we've already done.
That's right. We need to get her to write her story in a book form.
That's good. All right. You have a great Christmas, and we'll talk soon.
Okay. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.